Better Call Saul is in its final stretch of episodes, and leading up to the finale, I'm rewatching all of the Breaking Bad verse. I've already made it through Better Call Saul and reviewed each of the seasons. Now I'm kicking off a series reviewing each of the seasons of Breaking Bad. This is week number 1, so we're talking about season 1. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comments section. Share your thoughts on Season 1 of Breaking Bad. This is a spoiler review, so feel free to spoil away down below in the comments section. No need for spoiler warnings. And if you haven't watched Season 1 of Breaking Bad, why are you watching my channel? Go watch Breaking Bad and then come and join the conversation over here. Also, one quick disclaimer before I get started with all of this. I meant to put this video out like 2 or 3 weeks ago. I actually watched through the season about a month ago, and then life got in the way. I was traveling, my wife was traveling, and we've had COVID in my house for the last couple of weeks. And so I haven't been able to get this video done up until this point in time. So I've got a lot of notes written down. I've tried to refresh my mind reading through the Wikipedia synopses, but my mind might not be so fresh on some of the specifics as I would like it to be while doing one of these season reviews. Just to let you know before we get started, and let's get started. To state the obvious, Breaking Bad is one of the great television shows of the 21st century, I suppose of all time, and it takes this odd concept about a teacher who's diagnosed with cancer, and he just snaps and decides to start cooking meth to pay his medical bills, and it just turns it into some of the most compelling television of all time through fantastic writing and amazing characters acted to perfection. And it all started off with this season. A little bit of my history with Breaking Bad. I started watching Breaking Bad, I guess, right after season 4 ended, and during its original run. When it first debuted, it wasn't a big, gigantic hit when it was only on AMC, but as soon as it got picked up on Netflix and people could go back and binge watch it, it just became this cultural phenomenon. And because the show got so good in the later seasons, everybody hopped on. I was one of those people that hopped on, and, you know, I watched the finale live when it first aired. And then I've rewatched through the entire series, I believe, one full time back in 2019 when El Camino came out, and I'm currently rewatching it again. And this is my first time rewatching through Breaking Bad after having seen all of Better Call Saul, save for these final stretch of episodes. And so this is kind of my first time watching through it in chronological order, and it makes for kind of a little bit of a different experience because they really do tie all these little details, all these visual things from Breaking Bad into Better Call Saul. And so you watch them and they have a totally different meaning, certain characters, certain references, certain things after you've seen Better Call Saul. So if you haven't watched Better Call Saul, I do recommend you binge through the entire thing, catch up on this season, watch the finale with us in about a month. But they just have such a tightly woven universe. And there's all these little details that I'd kind of forgotten. Oh yeah, that character showed up in Breaking Bad first. Oh yeah, that's what that image is. Oh, that's what that is. And just, it gives so much more context and fleshes so much of it out. So what do I think about Breaking Bad Season 1? To me, this feels like a pilot season of television. What do I mean by that? Well, a pilot episode is where you make one episode. It's a little bit of a test to try and figure it out. Does it work? Does the casting work? And sometimes they'll shoot a pilot and they'll like the show, but they won't like an actor or an actress, and they'll swap them out. Something will be wrong in the tone, and so they'll go, okay, this is good, but instead do this, and they tweak it a little bit, and then you go into the rest of the episodes, and they've changed the formula just a little bit to kind of find the perfect version of it. Breaking Bad feels like a pilot season of television where they had a great idea. They have a great team of writers. They cast it right, but trying to figure out all the little nuances of how do you tell this kind of dark comedy that's a compelling drama. How dark do you want to go? How much do you want to balance all this stuff? The whole season feels like they're trying to figure some of that stuff out. Some of the immediate ones that just kind of pop out. The first episode, has a naked lady in it, which the rest of the show does not. Maybe you have naked Walter White, but naked ladies. And so little things like that where they go full blown rated R. they backed off on that later on in the show. There's this whole kind of plot line in the first few episodes where Jesse Pinkman is into MILFs and hooks up with prostitutes twice his age, and they're cooking meth and hooking up in a hotel room. And they don't really continue down that path. His lady friend in season 2 is much more age appropriate and not with methed out teeth. And so they softened certain edges. The show was always dark, but they took a certain grimy grossness off after this first season. Likewise, one of the things when I first watched the show, and then I noticed it again rewatching this time, there's all these little things in season 1 where they did kind of this, almost doing like, I don't know if this is a reference that's age appropriate for whoever's watching this, but there used to be the show called Mr. Wizard back when I was growing up. Likewise, a show called MacGyver about all the fancy, exciting things about science that you can do. And MacGyver was this guy that could turn anything into something exciting. First season of Breaking Bad has an awful lot of moments where Walter White combines Mr. Wizard science with MacGyver. I can make something for everything. And he keeps like creating these compounds to escape these scenarios and creating fake crystal meth that explodes when you throw it on the ground. And he's doing all this stuff. So when I first watched the show, I was like, oh, this is like Mr. Wizard and MacGyver combined with drug dealing. Oh, cool. That's not really where the rest of the show goes. There's some of that later on, but it's very heavily prominent in season 1 in a way that it's not prominent later on. And just kind of figuring out exactly how this works, what people resonate with, what do they want to do, what's sustainable, what's compelling. Even the pacing dramatically shifts in this season. Episode 1, it covers like multiple weeks, I think, and like how much stuff happens in that one episode compared to how much stuff happens in the second episode. Like how quick you fly through from establishing his day-to-day life. He's a teacher. He's got multiple jobs, his home life, his brother-in-law. He's sick. He comes up with a plan. They cook meth. They try to sell it, and it goes bad. Like that's probably the most cram-packed episode in all of Breaking Bad. Better Call Saul, Breaking Bad, the Kickstarter of all of it it moves at such a faster pace on plot points than anything else here. And then you get to the next two, and it's like 2 episodes cover 24 hours with a guy in the basement. And they're just figuring out our pacing a little bit, figuring out how all of this kind of works. And we start off at the beginning and it's super flashy and he's going to cook meth and then there's guns being pulled on him and Mr. Wizard, there's an explosion. Teacher guy cooks out some people in an RV, has to capture one of them. And then next 2 episodes where we got a guy chained up in the basement trying to decide what we're going to do with him. And then episode 4, it's just a family drama. And we're figuring all of this out a little bit. And what ingredients work and how do you balance all of these pieces? All of those things I described, that's in all of this show. But how do you balance it quite right? That's what this season felt like to me. They're figuring out exactly how to massage all the different aspects that they're going for. Like, do we want a bunch of people with actual crystal meth teeth on our show? No, we'll have a show about crystal meth. Maybe we won't have people with nasty cooked out teeth. Let's soften that aspect of what crystal meth actually does to human beings. And so there's a lot of things like that kind of felt like it adjusted as the show went along. Big thing you gotta talk about with Breaking Bad and season 1, and this will be continuing to be discussed throughout the show, Walter White and his journey. And what on earth is going on with this guy that you go from mild-mannered teacher to drug kingpin and killer guy? How do you so quickly break bad and shift like that? And the show plays very differently when you know the end and you've seen who he turns into. And so then you watch the show and you're seeing each step along the way in that journey to becoming this guy that's so different, so detached from where he starts as, what he was presented as at the beginning. And you think you only get a few moments of him, a few scenes in the full runtime of the show, only a little bit, letting us know who he was before Breaking Bad and snapping. Because he so quickly doesn't just do something bad, but he very quickly, dramatically shifts. And of course, there's that side to it of that he's having a midlife crisis and looking back on his life, compounded by a diagnosis of cancer, and he believes he only has a short amount of time left, compounded by he thinks he can do this and he'll die, and so he won't have to face the consequences of it. He doesn't have to linger with this. So he comes up with this extreme solution because he's in an extreme situation. You know, okay, what can I do right now to make a bunch of money so that my family isn't shackled with debt? And when you're under stress, when you don't think clearly, and he's doing all this by himself, and so you get that first initial version of it, glimpse into like, why would he do this? Okay, there he has no other options. That's the first version you see in the episode 1. Like, why does he do this? He has a skill set. He sees a person over there. He thinks he's going to die. He won't get caught. He won't leave his family with a bunch of debt. Let's do this. And then we scoot along through the season, and we start to learn, like, wait a minute, this guy actually has some pretty big connections to people. This guy used to be a big deal. Like, really kind of a big deal in some of the stuff that he did. What's going on here? Then you get to episode 5, and you realize not only does he have connections to past people, they are willing and able to solve this problem, to make it go away. And we're in a moment where everything plays different when you know what happens to Walter White and how dark this all goes. We know where it goes. You have an episode where you're looking at it, and he could just leave all this behind. Like, okay, he snapped for a month, cooked a little meth, killed a couple people, melted them in a bathtub. And now he's going to, like, okay, those were bad dudes. I made a bad choice and a bad state of mind. And the const was those people. Now I've got friends from the past that can cover this. And you're in this moment where you go, there's a version of, like, the whole show could have ended right there. But Walter won't accept help. He doesn't want charity. He refuses it from those people. And you start to, like, surface level, don't want to leave my family with debt, and here's a way to do it, won't face consequences. And you start digging deeper. That's what the show does so well. Like, you introduce a version that makes sense and is compelling on the surface. And you dig a little bit deeper on what's going on with this guy. And you realize there's this person that is deeply resentful of his life. Deeply resentful of the hand that he's been dealt and where it's ended up. That he believes he should be this super famous chemist, crystallologist, or whatever, that has all these skills. And the people he worked with, these companies that he was a part of, have taken off. And because of love, because of a troubled pregnancy, he's found himself working a job, or working as a teacher, that he seems to enjoy well enough. And then he has to go and clean cars at nighttime to make enough money. And he knows all along, I have the talent and the ability to be top tier at something. And instead, I am washing the car for my douchebag student who is mocking me. You have this person deeply resentful of his life. Suddenly, his actions play very differently. He's so proud, but humbled by life. So arrogant, but life keeps beating him down. And this is the context where he discovers he's really good at something. Like, his skill set, here's another way I can use that thing. Something like the depth of the analysis that you could do of Walter White and all the reasons for why he does what he does and how far it goes and how extreme it is. And such a fascinating character that makes him one of the great characters of all time. And it's an example of an actor being helped by his previous reputation. Because you have this actor that's like, can do extreme dramatic performances, but he's famous for being the funny dad on Malcolm in the Middle. So you take Malcolm in the Middle guy, you put him in this show, and there's a little bit of carried over expectations. Remember him as that going into this. And it just makes for him to be believable as this guy that everyone thinks is mild-mannered Walter White, but he has the acting chops to convince you that this is a very bitter person, frustrated at life, so much so that when he's offered a solution to his problem, he would rather cook crystal meth than take charity from those people that left him behind and took his company from him. And as you kind of go through, I've watched through season 2, and it's all. I watched through season 1 and 2 last month, unfortunately, so I got way ahead of myself. Should have waited a little longer to watch them, but you get like a couple moments in there, and I'll talk about this a lot more in season 2 review. But after his fugue state, and he's talking with his confidentiality with the person, and he has this little bit where he just talks about how he describes his life, about his son, his job, his cancer, everything about it. And you go, this guy is so bitter and resentful. And he found this world to escape where he can be the best and he can be exciting and not just be this mild-mannered, humbled man that just feels like all of life's been beaten out of him. Suddenly he has this exciting situation that brings a life out of him. And the show, even in the first episodes, visualize this through his sex life of like, he just feels beaten down by life. And then he comes home and suddenly he's passionate towards his wife and tried to visualize what's kind of going on with like him. He's been brought back to life by cooking meth and going to battle with drug dealers. And just give you this little glimpse of just how beaten down this proud, extremely intelligent, extremely capable man was. Not everything I think of this season is entirely great. And so the show, is for being one of the best written shows of all time, that's one of the best shows of all time, has some things that, like every show, has its faults. And I think one of them is the Waltz family are just the worst. Like, Hank has his obvious, like, bravado and the subtle little racist jokes that are not even subtle racist jokes that he tells, and insensitivity in the way he does, but he has like a charisma to him, and he seems like a reasonable guy that's trying to do the right thing. He's willing when he sees Walt doing things he shouldn't do, he'll like call him out a little bit. He's always trying to do the right thing while certainly having his faults. But the rest of them are just the worst. Of like, even they find out that he has cancer, and they confront him about him in this way, like, what are you doing, dude? It's like everyone deals with like, we know as the audience, like, yeah, he's up to no good. But in real life, people respond to horrible news differently, and they have to process it differently. And his family's just like, why don't you tell us about this? Like, that's their first response. It's not like, let's work with you and try and figure out like a compassionate version of like, yeah, oh yeah, man, you must be really struggling if you didn't tell us this for a while. They just confront him about it. Skylar's nagging constantly. His son is just frustrating and difficult in his own ways, and Marie has no redeeming qualities whatsoever. And so it's actually watching through it and being like contrasting with Better Call Saul, where the supporting cast there are much more balanced characters. I don't know, even like charismatic might not even be the right word for it, because everyone in this universe there's such broken, multi-layered people that no one's just good and fun and charismatic. No one's just bad and devoid of charm. Well, maybe some of the Salamancas, but everyone has something about them that's interesting. But Better Call Saul, I feel like the characters, like in the moment, it's much easier to see the multiple layers to them. You think even like Chuck, who could be so terrible to Jimmy, but you understand his worldview a lot better. Better than a lot of the, understand like Marie, what she's thinking. She's just a selfish person, a very bratty grown-up. Whereas Chuck, you understand like how he's wrong, but you know why he's doing what he's doing. You know you get his perspective, as flawed as it can be. And that's what makes some of these, watching them together and how good the writing can be here. But anyway, yeah, Walt's family are just the worst. They are just, their responses to things are so terrible. So many different occasions. And I mentioned before, there's some just odd things in here where it felt like they were trying to figure out how to balance drug world, family life, all these different things. So you get like this very random subplot about Marie shoplifting. It kind of goes somewhere in the second season, but not really. It's just like, Marie needs to be doing something. So what if she stole a crown to give to Skylar's newborn baby, or Walt and Skylar's newborn baby? Okay. I don't need a subplot about Marie stealing a tiara. I don't need that one. We can sit that one out. So there's just a lot of things like that where it's like, they hadn't fully fleshed out all the details to have all the exciting things that you might want to do with everything as early on. But yeah, other things to kind of talk about in here. Talked about how the show plays a little bit differently when you've seen Better Call Saul and you realize how much they kind of went back and forth. And like I completely forgot that Crazy 8 was the guy from the first 2 episodes. Like as I was watching through Better Call Saul, I was like, this guy looks so familiar. And it's not even that I forgot his face from Breaking Bad. It's that you don't even realize how much you're watching the origin story of that character. Because when you see him in Breaking Bad in these first 3 episodes, he's the hardened drug pusher that's like pulling guns out and being abrasive. When he's introduced on Better Call Saul, he's much lower level. And he's like, hey, man, I couldn't get all my money. And Nacho has to go beat the crap out of him. And you see those little things that start to harden him a little bit and kind of change his perspective and bring him on this journey to be the guy that he is in Breaking Bad. That's one of the things that, like, you don't even realize how many origin stories are actually taking place in Better Call Saul. Once again, if you haven't seen it, you got to watch it. It's just as well written, not as flashy right out of the gate, or not as flashy. It's not not as many guns are being pulled out and explosions. It's not as that stuff as much. It's written just as well, though. But you see kind of like him brought into it. And then episode 4, this little incident at a gas station with just this douchebag, and Walter gets mad at him, decides to blow up the guy's engine, and totally missed it while watching through Better Call Saul twice that this guy that Kim and Jimmy scam, it's the same guy from this episode. And they found these little ways to like tie back in. There's so many more little references that just make it such a fulfilling second viewing of, or watching the show after watching Better Call Saul, because you still have the same initial creative team, same people pulling it all together and just creating a very different type of shared universe. When both shows are being written so well and the quality hasn't dipped, it only has gotten better in a lot of ways as they went along. You just get something really, really fun. Closing thoughts on here. I'm about to run out of time on my camera. The season, I think they ran into some issues with a writer's strike, and so the season was cut a little bit short, and it ends at a weird point. Like if it had ended at the end of episode 6, where meet Tuco, boom, boom, explosion, and then they leave outside. You get this dramatic conclusion like, oh, they're doing a deal with Tuco. And instead they have to end it at this point in time of like, okay, that happened. They cook some more meth and they cut a deal with them. And then they realize Tuco's a little bit crazy, which we already kind of knew. And then the season ends. Just very weird point to end it. So at the end of episode 6 would make sense, or at the end of, I think, episode 2 or 3 of season 2, feels like that makes sense as season 1. Ending where it does feels like, whoops, writer strike happened. We got to end abruptly. But anyway, I think a great start to a great universe. Definitely, you can feel them working some things out. Walter's family, they certainly hadn't figured out fully what to do with them that's interesting and compelling quite yet. But, you know, I have criticisms as I talk through all this, but I think Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, two of the best written shows of all time. Let me know what you thought down below. Check out my other Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul content over there, and keep talking movies and TV too much.